Hello, this is a video about using autofocus for close-ups or macros, whatever you prefer to call them. Most people know that, most photographers know, that you can't use autofocus, or it isn't effective, as you approach magnifications of 1:1. In my experience, that's true. If I'm using an interchangeable lens camera with a prime macro lens, like my Canon 70D with a Canon 100L macro, or the one I've got at the moment, which is a Sigma 105 DG-HSM macro. What happens is that as I approach 1:1, the focusing gets worse, autofocusing gets worse and worse. The camera tends to, or the lens tends to hunt backwards and forwards, take ages, and sometimes won't focus at all. If you use a lens that goes beyond 1:1, like a Canon MPE 65 or a Venus Optics 2:1 macro lens, then you don't even have the opportunity of using autofocus because the lens doesn't provide it. When I'm photographing invertebrates, insects, spiders and so on, I use a bridge camera. We're looking at the moment at the LCD of my Panasonic FZ200 bridge camera, on which I've got a Venus Optics twin flash to provide some flashlight and also a focusing lamp. And on the front of the FZ200 I've got a Raynox 250 achromatic close-up lens. As you can see, looking at the LCD, we're looking at a scene that's about 22 millimeters across. In fact, that's better. If I zoom in a bit, there, that's now about 22 millimeters across. I'm now going to move the camera so that the picture goes out of focus, and I can't use autofocus now. It's critical with a close-up lens to get the distance right between the camera and the subject. So I move back, and there I go. I've used autofocus to take an image of a scene which is about 22 millimeters wide. What I'm going to do now is to zoom in, and I'm now looking at a scene that's 8 or 9 millimeters across, something like that. And now it's more sensitive to what the distance is, so I just moved the camera so that the distance is okay, and now I've got autofocus, there we go, with a much smaller scene. Incidentally, you'll notice in the middle there's a very small square. That's what I'm focusing on, so that if I want to focus somewhere else I can move to where I want to focus, grab focus and then recompose and take the picture. Alternatively, I can move this, and I use this sometimes when I'm tracking a snail that's in motion. I don't want the snail in the middle of the picture, or I don't want the part of the snail that I'm focusing on in the middle of the picture, and so if it's moving right to left I might move the focus box down there and then have autofocus as I'm taking pictures and tracking it as it moves right to left. Now you might think that this is all very well, but I'm using a rather easy target. So I'm going to replace the ruler, and instead I've got a bookmark which doesn't have such strong contrast. So I've moved the camera so I can't focus. I'm moving back, and there we go, I've got autofocus. Again, this was at, 8 or 9 millimeters across. What I'm going to do now is to take the Raynox 250 off of the camera and instead put a Raynox MSN 202. This is more powerful, so it gives me more magnification. Put the ruler back. Now I've got to get much closer to the subject. I'll put my focus thing back in the middle. There we go. I might actually leave it bigger, which will help with this, because this gets more difficult now. So I roll the camera in, and by the way, I'd normally be using, when I'm using the sort of magnifications that we started with, or well, a bit less than that, I'd quite often be working handheld. The rest of the time I work like I am at the moment, which is what I call tripod assisted. My hands are actually on the camera, and that's what's causing it to shake. But I need to do that in order to get to take a picture of what I want to take a picture of. It's too difficult to organise it so that you can set the shot up and move your hands away, wait for it to all settle down and that sort of stuff. Your subjects may be moving, or they may be just about to move. So I find I need to keep my hands on the camera. I'm going to zoom back a bit now. And we've got, where are we? 1, 2, 3, 4, about 4.5 millimeters, that'll do. And that was autofocus. And if I now zoom in all the way, now it's not really very practical here because there's so much movement with the, my hand is causing so much movement. It's actually better to use a different technique. But there we go, that's, well, I don't know, 2.5 millimeters, something like that. But anyway, it did autofocus. I don't find that practical in the field, but it does do it. And again, if I'll roll it back a bit just to be more realistic about this. But if I take the ruler away and put the lower contrast subject back, then I need to get the distance right. There we go. And I've got autofocus at, I don't know, whatever it was. Take that away. There's actually something glass holding it up, a paperweight. And there's a picture, yep, of the dust on the paperweight. So that's it, autofocus with a bridge camera and achromats at fairly large magnifications. That's it. Bye-bye.